It's been over 4 years since Pathfinder 2nd Edition came out. That's 4 years of player feedback and time for designers to look back on the rules they've created and see what continues to work, what needs improvement. And recently, Paizo released the Remastered Edition. So let's take a look at these books, see what makes them different, figure out if it's better, and should you get it. Now, yes, this review is coming out a few months late. Back in the fall, when I got an email about the review copy of the remaster coming my way, I took a quick look and was planning on filming the video once my physical copy arrived. Then things got busy with the holiday season, work, and our little chaos goblin, i.e. our toddler. And fast forward to a couple weeks ago when we got a different package from Paizo, and I suddenly thought, did I miss the remastered package arriving? I checked around and nope, that package seems to have disappeared into the ether. Or more likely, it got swiped off of our porch. But since I also got the PDF of the remastered books, we're going to move forward with the review. The mess of the OGL license and all the stuff with the Wizards of the Coast kind of last winter, for better or worse, pushed a lot of people to explore games outside of Dungeons & Dragons. Many found Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Yay! Coincidentally, Paizo was already working on a remastered edition of 2E. In addition to updating and clarifying rules, Paizo has used this edition to move completely away from the OGL. You'll no longer using D&D spells, ability, languages, and creature terms. So if you're an existing player switching over to the remastered from regular 2nd edition, this might take a little time, but everything makes sense. You say diabolical instead of abyssal languages, or caustic blast instead of acid splash. All these term changes I noticed translated well and make sense. Now, the first thing I noticed with the remastered is it has split things up differently. Instead of having a core rulebook, a game mastery guide, and then an advanced player's guide, there are now 2 books. One for players and one for GMs. And there also are a few things thrown in from some other books in there. And I'm going to get into a few details about each of these books in a moment, but first let's look at some overall changes. The look. While the old book had this parchment effect, the remaster instead is much simpler, has a white background and higher contrast and bolder colors. All of this makes it a lot easier to read. I really appreciate it. I find it a lot easier to skim and identify with this higher contrast and the white background than with the parchment. Just something about it, the words stand out more, and that's the important part of this book. Overall, they've traded some aesthetic choices that may have added some more atmosphere for utilitarian design that just functions better as a rulebook. Both books have a solid table of contents that is just much more useful. I really appreciate that the subsections are broken down and included with their page numbers. It just makes finding what you need that much easier. It's taken kind of the previous table of contents seemed like an introduction to the different sections of the book. This is now truly a table of contents. Additionally, the sidebar helps you see where you are in the book and flip, around and navigate your way a lot faster. But those section summaries that used to be in the table of contents are still in the book. Instead of cluttering up that table of contents, they're now in the using this book section. I think this is a great choice because new players can read it as they are getting acquainted with the system and the book for the first time and understand what each section is when they first use it, but the table of contents can be just that. And, existing players, people who are coming back to this book to check rules or level up their characters, don't have to, look at that section again. They can just skip over it. Now, on a design note, I am a little disappointed to see a lot of orphaned headers and widowed paragraphs in both books. This doesn't necessarily hurt the readability too bad. I'd just really like to see Paizo up their layout game in future books, because there are a few moments, especially with spells, where you can lose stuff and suddenly be like, oh, if the title's on one page and the rest of the spell is on another, I missed out some information, or just make it harder to find that information. This is all just layout nitpicky stuff. Also, since I've been using the PDF version, I'm a little disappointed that it's not clickable because it still counts the cover as page 1. So I can't even just jump to the right page number by typing it in unless I remember, oh, I have to always subtract 1. And then once you're actually in the book, you know, if it's a PDF, it's a lot harder to just flip to the right section. You have to just keep scrolling. But at least the sidebars let you know where in the book and kind of how far you have to keep scrolling. Before I get to reviewing each individual book, I want to take a moment to thank all of our patrons, especially Black Dragon Gaming. Patrons help us make these videos. If you want to help support what we do and get some cool perks, head on over to patreon.com/rollforinitiative and become a patron today. Okay, so let's get into each book, starting with the player core. Overall, I think it's fantastic player-focused rulebook, especially for new players. Key Terms has its own section, great for those new players to be able to understand the book and the game, and it's also nice for anyone who maybe hasn't gamed in a while or you played a different system and want to brush up on the Pathfinder terms before you start playing. There are two big differences in character creation in the Remastered Edition. That's no alignment and no ability scores. The alignment system has always been something that felt so nebulous and just not helpful. It was a holdover from D&D, and it was always hard for people to agree on what, chaotic good was, what neutral evil was. There was always disagreements on that. Most people I've played with have picked an alignment and then kind of promptly forgot about it, or just never even bothered to fill it in. Instead, the Remastered Edition has introduced edicts and enhancements, which I think are much more useful ideas for roleplay. Basically, they're things your character will always or never do. And instead of ability scores, you have attributes. It's similar, the names are the same, but the difference is instead of having a base score and then a modifier, you just have the modifier. Simpler. The way the chapters are laid out has some improvements, like if you don't want to pick out all of your individual equipment, the quick equipment packs are at the beginning of the chapter instead of at the end. And I also noticed in the equipment section, they added more art. The player core has information from both the original core and the advanced player guide, which makes it great because you just need one book instead of carrying around two. Now you'll notice there are a couple classes missing. The Paladin and Alchemist I specifically saw weren't there. Not sure if this is something that Paizo will add in a remastered advanced player guide, or if they've just decided to do away with these classes entirely. For me, I think you might be able to kind of still get the Paladin feel if you combine a fighter and cleric multi-class, or just choices you make for either of those classes. And while the Alchemist seemed fun, I rarely saw it be all that fun to actually play. But that's just my opinion, and maybe you love the Alchemist, in which case you can keep using it from 2nd edition Unmastered Core. What are we calling it? You can keep using it and just make a few changes to fit the remastered. I also like that wizards choose spells based on their school and arcane thesis. Mechanically, I think this does allow you to have a few less spells, but it makes the wizards much more defined as a magic user who have gotten there through academic research. I really like that, and I think Paizo can introduce some fun lore for wizards in upcoming books. Leshy's and Orc ancestries are included in the player book, and instead of half-elf and half-orc, you have instead versatile heritages, which allow you to mix any two ancestries and heritages. Very excited to see that they included this, and I'm looking forward to seeing the mixed ancestry characters people create, like a Leshy Orc. You may also notice there's not a settings chapter. Paizo moved the Lost Omens chapter to the GM book. Generally, I think the GM is going to use the setting info more than the players, and I think that's a good way to cut down on weight and bulk in the player's book. I like that as a player, I just need this one book, and it seems like it's a good size to include everything I'd need to reference without being too heavy to carry with me to game. And the new character sheet. Oh my god, such an improvement. I've made a video reviewing Pathfinder character sheets, and now I feel like I may need to make another video and include this because It's just so much better. Gone are all of the colors that made it an eyesore to look at. It's still pretty dense, and my brain hurts a little looking at it, but I'm not really sure how to get away from that because you need a lot of info for your character. And something about the skills section feels cluttered, but I'm not really sure what that is. I'm just so glad it's not the color version. And I'm also really glad to see that they kept some of the shape bubbles, and oh boy, it's just such an improvement. Good job, Paizo. All right, let's move on to the GM core. Like the player core, this is laid out very well. It's got info about running the game from the original core as well as from the Game Mastery Guide. So you just need that one book. Plus, like I said earlier, it has the Lost Omens setting and treasure chapters. There is a lot of concrete and practical info in this book, and it's one of the better Game Master / Dungeon Master books I've seen. Like the player core, the table of contents is much more useful as a reference point. I also really appreciate that subchapters are all noted and include the page numbers. That makes checking something while you're prepping or running a game just so much easier and faster. The overall order of the book is also really well done, and if you're new to running a game, it's going to guide you through the process and the steps. First, you have a chapter focused on running the game. This is full of great advice and how-tos for any game master, whether you're running a module or a homebrew game. I think starting with this is great since many first-time game masters do start with a module, and so they don't necessarily need to know as much about how to create a game or create a setting. But if you are, it then moves into how to build a campaign, how to create your own. Arguably, this is perhaps a more advanced skill for game masters. And within all of the chapters are these great subbars filled with advice. I appreciate that they include stuff about session 0, safety tools, how to do secret checks, and ways to handle adjudicating rules. This is really great, especially for those moments when your players do things that are unexpected or maybe slightly out of the rules, or there's not a clear answer of how this would work. All of these aren't necessarily rules for the game, but they are skills and tools a game master needs that many other game master books just leave out. And the tools for actually building a game, like the encounter builder, all make sense and are clear how to use them. There's also a chapter on subsystem rules. I like that this is kind of broken out into its own thing, because they're rules that may or may not come up in your game, but it's still great to be able to quickly figure out like how to run a chase, a duel, how to do intrigue, vehicles, all of those things that you may find yourself needing, but maybe aren't regular game elements. The treasure section seems to have quite a lot there. You'll find stuff that used to be in the player section, like the alchemical items, and this chapter and the Lost Omens chapter are the two that I could see the players wanting to kind of read or look through on their own, but because they're their own sections of the book, I think this makes it easy to let them read them and reference them. Now, while there are rules for building your own creatures, you aren't going to find pre-built monsters and foes in this book. I'm kind of mixed on this because I would have liked to have seen a couple perhaps at the back of the book, but they are coming out with a remastered monster core book later this year, and we are planning on reviewing it. And you can use existing monster stats from other second edition books that are already out. So, perhaps it's okay, let's put all of the monsters in one book so that makes it easy to find and reference, and all of the how to be a game master and run a game in another book. Like, I would have liked to seen a couple as examples, and especially because the remastered Monster Core book isn't available right now. But I can see the thought process behind it, and I do kind of appreciate it. What do you think about that one? So, overall, do I think you should get this book? If you are new to Pathfinder, yes, absolutely. If you already have the other core books, Probably not. There are guides on how to make the changes if your group wants to switch over to the remastered, and it's not that much of a difference, which I also appreciate because it means if you have other two ebooks, you can keep using them with the remastered edition. It's a remastered, it's not a brand new edition. But if you are interested in fully switching over, it's nice that they are broken up so players just need the player book and the game masters can pick up the game master book. You don't have to buy 3 new books. So have you picked up the remastered books? What do you think? And if you haven't, are you planning on picking them up? Or if you're not, why aren't you going to get them? Let's chat about it more in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on Roll for Initiative. Bye! The Lork and... Lork? That's a Leshy Orc combo.